Thank you very much for staying with us. Now let's begin with some developments in the polity. The Nigerian Senate has approved President Tinubu's loan request of 1.767 trillion naira, equivalent to $2.209 billion for part financing of the 9.7 trillion naira budget deficit in the 28.7 trillion naira 2024 budget. This development comes 48 hours after President Tinubu sent the request to the National Assembly for approval. National Assembly correspondent Judicial reports.
Chairman of the Committee on Local and Foreign Debt, Senator Aliu Wamako, submits findings of his committee before the upper legislative chamber. The committee was given only 24 hours to consider Mr. President's request for approval. The committee's findings reveals the funding plan for the loans will be through issuance of Eurobonds in the international capital market, debut sovereign stock in the international capital market, and bridge finance.
Nigeria has raised $16.92 billion in the international market, with $15.12 billion outstanding. 2. The bridge financing option will be used only if market conditions delay the Eurobond issuance.
What they had to do took them just 24 hours. This should have been something that would have taken longer time. They show sacrifice, you show sacrifice for the interest of the country by working around the clock to make sure that you get everything done. And not only done, but properly done.
In another development, the Senate has passed the Conference Committee's report on a bill to amend the National Drug Law Enforcement Agency Act. The contentious Clause 11, which prescribes death penalty for drug offenders, has been changed and now proposes a life sentence.
The Conference Committee adopted the House version of life imprisonment rather than the Senate version of death sentence, against the backdrop of the fact that right now, Mr. President, distinguished senators, we have 52,901 people arrested for this crime between 2021 and now. 52,901. If the Senate version is adopted, that means all the 52,901 will be executed.
Also following a motion by the Senate's Chief Whip, Senator Tahir Mongono, the Senate has also urged the Nigerian Armed Forces to establish armed camps at endangered local government areas in Borno State. TVC News, Abuja.
The Lagos State Governor, Babajide Sanwo-Olu, has presented the 2025 budget to the State House of Assembly. The appropriation bill of 3 trillion naira is tagged budgetary sustainability. Governor Sanwo-Olu says it is structured around 5 key pillars, including infrastructure sustainability, economic diversification, and institutional reforms.
The budget of sustainability embodies the values that have always defined us as Lagosians: resilience, innovation, inclusivity, and sustainability. It speaks to our vision of balancing the pressing needs of today with the undeniable responsibility of securing the future. This budget is structured around 5 key pillars designed to ensure economic stability, environmental stewardship, and a social equity. Infrastructure sustainability is one, economic diversification is another, social inclusion and human capital development is one again, environmental sustainability, and finally, governance and institutional reforms.
In security matters, troops of the Nigerian military have scaled up operations against terror groups, including Lakurawa. Director of Defense Media Operations, Major General Edward Buba, says coordinated land and air offensives have taken out terror group fighters. Tifonesian reports.
It's another forum where the military authorities give updates about their operations nationwide. Troops' operations continue to take out terror group fighters in the northwest and northeast. At least 5 soldiers also lost their lives. Reports from the military indicate 61 terrorists were killed in the northeast.
it is clear that our focus is on fighting terrorists across the country. We have indeed been striking terrorist enclaves from our air attacks. We have also exerted significant military power on areas in which these terrorists are hibernating.
Responding to the allegations of the Navy's involvement in crude oil theft, General Abuba said the military would not be blackmailed.
You see, I'm almost laughing because it's laughable. It's laughable. But what I want to say about this sort of situations is, look, we seek cooperation, not conflict. Okay? That's what we want. That is what our people want. That is what Nigeria wants. We want to increase the crude oil production of our nation to help our nation. That is the mainstay of our economy. We don't want all this back and forth, all this cheap fighting. That's not what we want.
Despite this, crude oil theft and pipeline vandalism remain significant challenges to the federal government's target of 2.2 million barrels per day. Sifon Asian, TVC News, Abuja.
Let's take a short break, and when we return, we'll be discussing President Tinubu's fight against corruption. Mr. Adenuga is the chairman of Boot Party. Welcome back, everyone. Nigeria's fight against corruption has been a long-standing battle, but there have been successes and challenges. President Bola Tinubu's administration is building on these foundations. His government's commitment to transparency and accountability is evident. The whistleblower policies and anti-corruption agencies' efforts have continued to yield positive results in the fight against corruption in Nigeria. The Tinubu administration has focused on strengthening institutions by enhancing the effectiveness of anti-corruption agencies. And the government is also implementing open governance initiatives to promote accountability and transparency as key tools in curbing corrupt practices. Despite these successes, corruption remains a critical issue in Nigeria. And just recently, the federal government has threatened to sanction ministries, departments and agencies for non-compliance as it's announced plans to address Nigeria's 39 trillion naira negative net asset balance by establishing a comprehensive national assets register. Joining us tonight for tonight's conversation as we focus on President Tinubu's fight against corruption is Sonny Adenuga, is the chairman of Boot Party. Good evening to you, sir. Thank you so much for joining us this evening, Mr. Adenuga. It's good to see you again.
So much. Yeah, nice to see you again. Thanks for having me. Yeah.
Right. So let's start this conversation from the federal government's threat to sanction ministries, departments, agencies for non-compliance, as plans are now in top gear to address Nigeria's negative net asset balance by establishing a comprehensive national asset register. First, how do you react to this threat, and how timely is it?
Yeah, I think government should not actually be issuing threats. It's about doing what is right and then setting the policies. And when we talk about fight against corruption, unless we're deceiving ourselves here, let's get serious for once. The fight against corruption has to be about preventing corruption. For me, it looks useless when someone has already stolen some money, state money, and they've left the office, and we now start using EFCC to chase them. That is not the approach that will work in a system like Nigeria. Let's borrow a leaf from removal of free subsidy. The logic was simple. We can't keep doing things the same way and expect a different outcome. And that's why, like myself and many other Nigerians, believe that the first subsidy needs to be gone long ago, and well done to Tinubu's administration. Now, can that same be done to fight against corruption? Everything the government have said so far is using the same approach that have been used in the past, that have been tested and failed against corruption. Can they just use the same logic of saying we can't keep going in the same direction and expect a different outcome. So it should now be about preventing corruption. I would suggest having Economic and Financial Prevention Commission. And that includes independency of Auditor General's office, up to the level of auditors in our MDAs. As we speak today, if you go to a typical MDAs in Nigeria, the auditor or the chief auditor, whatever the title is called in those MDAs, what happens is that they are responsible, they are answerable to the CEO or the boss of the MDAs. The question you look at is this. That in itself compromises the independency of an auditor. And the same thing applies to the Office of the Auditor General. Now, we can use technology to address some of these things. And by talking about technology, you can actually today deploy systems that before money is actually being spent, you know, a particular auditor will have actually checked it. And that has been tested even in our own country, Nigeria. So it's a case of willpower. And I'm going to score the government low in this regard, that there is no doubt willpower to actually fight corruption, in my view.
So
of course, there are some policies.
Continue with the rating, Mr. Denuga. I think you're projecting into the future. I think you're projecting into the future when you say we should prevent corruption, because at the moment
it's not about future. The future is tomorrow.
Corruption is endemic in this part of the world, in Nigeria. And for proper perspective and for the sake of our audience, kindly hold on. A comprehensive national assets register will aggregate, profile, and manage all national assets and investments. I mean, it's supposed to document all government-owned assets, from buildings and land to roads, hospitals, schools, and equipment. So, when reports say the country has 39 trillion naira negative net asset balance, what does this mean for our economy?
Yeah, it's very simple. When people talk about assets, okay, there is no any asset in Nigeria that belongs to Nigeria, that Nigerian owns, that is not directly linked to a particular MDA, that is ministry, department, or an agency. It's too simple. All we need to do is to actually ask those MDAs responsible to say, we want to see your asset. You see, the issue is this. I've had experience in some of this area, and that's where I dealt into talking about the problem of even the so-called auditors within the MDAs. Now, the issue at hand, you mentioned about strengthening our institutions. How are you going to strengthen an institution when the controls we have implemented, nobody's monitoring it? In my experience, if I wear my control hat, if I come into your organization and I'm looking at your processes and I want to see the controls you have implemented, even when you have controls in place, if there is no another process or an individual, an office that monitor that controls, it's a failure, because it's useless to have a control in place in the first instance where there's nobody monitoring it. And that's the issue we have today. So when we talk about preventing corruption, it's not just about saying we're looking into the future. It's not just about the future. We can go on today and keep talking about, doing things the same way. After all, before President Tinubu comes to power, people think it's normal for us to continue with fuel subsidy. But today, there was a different view, and which many of us agree to, that look, we can't continue going in that direction. Why should anyone still think we should continue in the direction of detecting corruption? In any form of, there are levels of controls you implement, both financially and otherwise. The best form of control is prevention. It is not detecting. When you want to detect something, it means the activity already happened. Then you start looking at logs. You start looking at transactions that happened, how many, maybe 10, 5 years ago. You have MDAs in Nigeria as we speak today who do not have, they cannot present to you their audited account in the last 3 years. And yet, they keep going through National Assembly and get their budget passed. I will borrow you a leaf. If you look at, there's a law in the United States of America, because they used to think the same way until Heron saga happened, if you recall. And then both the Congress in the United States, the Senate and their rep, passed a law they call Sarbanes-Oxley Act. What does it do? There are provisions of that laws. What it does is this. If you are a CEO of an organization, you are going to not only attest that financial statement you are producing is correct, but you're also going to attest that the controls that produces those financial data are correct. We have a country today where nobody is washing. That is just the honest truth. And we need to dig it down to the bottom.
So when you say control mechanisms, have to be in place, is data a deciding factor? Because if I'm to go by what the Accountant General has said concerning this, and that's Oluwatoyin Madeyi, she blamed this on a lack of comprehensive data on federal assets. And I'm wondering, for how long has this been so? As critical as this register is, it is supposed to provide transparent financial statements needed by international donors, investors, and economic stakeholders interested in Nigeria. And from the latest reports, MDAs have been given a compliance deadline of December 31st, 2024 to submit standalone financial statements. So my next question would be, I wanted to speak to the kind of measures needed for compliance sake.
Yeah, you see, of course, at the Accountant General's level, if she's got the power to say that to the MDAs, the key thing is that the policy statement has been made, so there is that desire from the Office of the Accountant General to actually make such request, and they have made that request. The question now is this: how would the MDAs go about this? Now, at the Accountant General level, you will not be able to blame the Accountant General alone. It's not about a blame game here, and if I had sounded like that, that's not the point I'm trying to make. It's just trying to say, look, this is where things are really wrong and where government itself needs to do a lot of things. Another example, when you look at the Office of the Accountant General and Office of the Auditor General, we've seen instances where even you find Accountant General's office trying to perform some of the functions of the Auditor General. And the Auditor General will complain they do not have the independencies that is required. You and I are not going to do those jobs. It's those guys who have been saddled with that responsibility by the laws of the land. They are going to do it. That is clear. All of us know that. However, when the structure does not allow them, makes it difficult or almost impossible to be able to carry out their functions independently. There is the word independency is very critical when an auditor performs his job, either at a low level or at a higher level. So it's not enough to just say, go and give me your asset register. It's easy in a non-corrupt environment. But we're in a corrupt system, and we have been on this for many years. The logic, the new direction of thinking should be that what new thing can be done? And that new thing today is about preventing corruption. And I'm going to use that to touch on some other areas that I've mentioned about. The government of the day also needs to make sure luxury is removed from governance. As we speak today, that's part of corruption. You find someone who probably before he gets to become an officer or a CEO of a particular MDA, he could not even afford to fly on a plane. And suddenly they start traveling abroad, traveling everywhere. Nobody has problem about traveling abroad for conferences. They start going on business class, even first class. And you keep asking yourself, where do we stop? So there needs to be that conscious effort from those who are responsible, those who are voted to power, to ensuring that these people who are in the MDAs do their biddings, do their desire. And that desire needs to be clear-cut. EFCC is spent, is gone. And as far as I'm concerned, their time is over. We need to be talking about Economic and Financial Crime Prevention Commission. And how is it going to be done? It is the tone at the top. It needs to be set by those in charge to say, look, we no longer want to be chasing anybody after spending our money. We want it before it's spent. We want to be sure that and nobody should say it's not possible. I know people can say it's futuristic. It's not futuristic. It's possible like 2 years down the line, 1 year down the line, even at a big national level. So it is actually something that is very doable. Yeah.
Right. The issue of corruption, what challenge does this pose to nation building?
I'm not sure I had your last question.
The issue of corruption, what challenge does it pose to nation building?
Of course, it poses a lot. I was listening to Dr. I'm not sure I can say it better than he said this morning Dr. Abayomi. And you could see he's an old, respected gentleman that I love to listen to. And he puts it well. Everything in our country, you can pin it down to corruption. And one of the discussions early this morning was about even foreign partners, people who are going to come and do business with us, people who want to bring their money into our country. If they cannot even trust the judiciary, you see the types of different interpretations. So corruption has eaten deep into the fabrics of our nation. And the best any government could do as we speak today is even to send a message out there. For me, it's not about going to send a message out there that corruption is over. It's not about going to carry people in their homes and start locking them and chasing them off. That's not how to prevent corruption. The best way to prevent corruption is making sure people don't even get the money in the first instance. Judiciary needs to be properly organized, and like Dr. Abayomi said, who are those who make decisions about appointing judges? If the laws needs to be changed, then they need to change it, because we cannot continue on this trajectory. And I would continue to say to Mr. President, you've done well with fuel subsidy. Yeah, I know it may not be popular with a lot of people, but some of us still believe that that's the direction to go. But that same logic can be deployed, can be applied to the thinking around corruption, such that it can be a thing of the past. So as for national building, without corruption being removed from what we do, I don't know what else can happen. You go to the police station, people don't even have the confidence when they see crime to go and report to the police. It's because of what? It's corruption. I don't know what system. You import things from abroad, and suddenly they tell you, oh, it's supposed to be so amount of millions. And then you ask when they finish clearing, how come you collected 10 million naira from me, but what I'm seeing that goes to government is just about 1 million? They will say, oh, God, don't say to everybody for that.
Mr. Adenuga, it's also sad that we have the anti-graft agencies working day and night, yet these successes often feel insufficient against the scale of the problem. For you, is it about the agencies or the increasing number of corrupt individuals in the country?
Well, you see, I always try to not to pin it down to individual or just a particular agency, because it looks like we're pointing fingers. But we need to all admit we are all responsible. And I've said this about Nigeria, both the led and the leaders, we're all responsible. And it's a call for all of us to rethink the way we approach issues. So, of course, there are agencies that have been saddled with responsibility to make sure that things run smoothly. But to be honest with you, I don't know how much resources that EFCC has got to be able to prosecute every corrupt cases in Nigeria. So that is the fact that it's overwhelming is even the best argument for the need for prevention of corruption. It's not about looking at ICPC or EFCC. How much can they do? What is the total number of manpower in EFCC to be able to prosecute? And in the modern world that we talk today, you can transfer some money today to someone's account. Maybe in the next 1 hour or two, the money will have gone to different parts of the world. It's that so easy. And that is why it is necessary for prevention of corruption rather than talking about detecting it. Of course, I don't know if the laws that establish EFCC, ICPC, and these institutions allows them to be able to work for prevention of corruption, because they may argue that, well, we have auditors in those organizations, we have accountants in those organizations who are supposed to be doing the needful and making sure all the books are correct, but that is not the order of the day in Nigeria. So it's not about pointing finger. We have got to that point. Is those at the top. If anybody we will blame, it's not because those who are there today are entirely responsible. That's also not the point. But because they are the one we voted into power, they are the one that is there today, they are the one that needs to make that call. They are the one that needs to make that decision that enough is enough, just like we've said about subsidy. We've said enough is enough. Enough is enough should also be said about corruption in the country. And that's where the buck stops at them. It's not a blame game.
Well, I also do not think it's about pointing fingers, because some Nigerians have asked, Could it also be about the president further strengthening the anti-graft agencies? And I say this because EFCC chairman Olaolukoede recently amplified other challenges affecting speedy trial of corruption cases, especially the incidents of suspects facing criminal investigation rushing to court to obtain orders of injunction, restraining the EFCC from inviting, investigating, interrogating, and arresting them. I mean, he went as far as revealing that the commission was unable to conduct investigation in at least 10 states of the federation. So I asked, is it about stronger anti-corruption structures or corrupt practices in the justice system?
Yeah, because when you look at it, it's a combination of both. It's not just one side. Because let's look at it, like I said, about how much resources has EFCC got. Now, I'm sure, I don't know about their workings, but clearly they will have to be even prioritizing the cases they will take to court, in addition to some of the views, I mean, what you've said, that the EFCC chairman is frustration to how the judiciary, but I don't like going too much about the judiciary aspect. But if you look at the other bits of things, that the resources even within the EFCC, how is it going to be possible for them? And even the EFCC itself, how is it organized? A lot of people today, if they tell you their experiences with EFCC, you're going to say, well, who's going to catch who here? But that's not, again, because you can go on and on and be talking about who should do what, who shouldn't do what. But the issue at today, Nigeria, is simple. We need to start thinking on how we're going to prevent corruption. And once we start thinking and most of this corruption, I think we need to put this clearly. The biggest of all the corruption we have is financial corruption. That's the biggest. Of course, there are other corruptions in the system, but it's the biggest of the corruption. When you look at the judiciary you're talking about, people early in the morning today, on this morning, there was talk about what's happening in the judiciary. And when you look at it, the politicians who wants to have their way at all costs, they don't obey the rule of engagement, saying, look, I've lost. But they want to have their way at all costs. And election has been conducted. Instead of saying, oh, I lost at the polls, they want to win by other technicalities. And they start going to approach the judiciary. And if someone has money to be able to lace the hands of some people in the judiciary, and they say, oh, come, let's listen to you. And all this add up to all the trouble of the land. So the issue at hand, and what I want to really talk about, if I'm going to add my voice, that maybe probably the starting point is granting 100% independency to the office of the Auditor General of the country. And one of the ways it could be done is very simple. With technology, every transaction that goes on in our MDAs can directly be audited by someone in Auditor General's office. And it can be a blind audit where whoever is processing the transaction will not even know a particular auditor that is actually going to be completing the audit, so that there is no reason for someone to know that, oh, it's Mr. Sunday Adenuga that is going to go and complete this audit and start looking for a way to bribe me again. There are ways, if this system is properly designed and implemented, to prevent people being able to abuse even the system we're thinking of using to challenge corruption. But the starting point is granting absolute independency to the Office of the Auditor General so that they can be able to do their work. Of course, it doesn't mean they will be able to prevent all the corruptions in its entirety, but depending on how the independency is granted, there could be a lot. Of course, I know the argument people will make, they will say, oh, it's going to slow down the process of government. But for heaven's sake, that slowing down is also part of control. I'm not advocating that should be the order of the day. But why are you rushing to? You know, in Nigeria, we love to rush a lot. And these are some of even my own personal problems. I always ask, where are you rushing? The only thing that cannot wait in life is life itself. And but that's a discussion for another day. So it's about preventing corruption, removing luxury from governance, strengthening our institution. And one of the ways of strengthening those institutions is this act of saying, look, we are saying no to corruption. We're no longer accepting it. It's not just about playing a lip service story. It's about the decisions made by those in authority to say, look, enough is enough. And things will start working. Of course, if you look at countries like Turkey, it took them years. They are not yet perfect, but it took them years to get out of their own rules as well. So nobody should be under any illusion that it's going to take us so easily like that. But
absolutely. So let's take a break, and when we come back, we will continue this conversation. Stay with us, everyone.
Every major news story is with many perspectives and layered with different levels of impact.
Hello. What time did this happen? Google Verizon.
At TVC News, we follow the big and major news, gathering the facts, witnessing the outcome.
I am here live at the aftermath of the approval of the new national minimum wage.
We are TV Station of the Year, not just for breaking news, but for being first, fair and accurate. TVC News, first with breaking news.
Welcome back to Politics Tonight, everyone. Thank you so much for staying with us on the program. Sonia Adenuga, chairman of Boot Party, is our guest for tonight, and we've been discussing President Bola Tinubu's fight against corruption. Mr. Adenuga, thank you so much for staying with us on the program. So let's continue this conversation. You know, when we talk about corruption, most times we point accusing fingers at the politicians. We often forget to talk about the country's value system, which celebrates even wealth obtained by questionable means, is greatly flawed. But how do we develop an effective public education to ensure a change of attitude and show people the true and damaging effects of corruption?
yeah, I think over generations, because when you look at our societies, we have this cultural identity where it is expected that families, communities, they are the one that raise a child, a newborn child. But we need to deviate from that thinking and start making sure that the curriculums we teach in our schools, from primary school, secondary, inculcate the concept of nation building. As it is today, it's disappointing, it's sad. People sometimes ask you, how did we get here? But we know how we got here. All we need to do is to retrace our steps. So we need to make sure that the curriculum we're teaching, let me give you an example. I don't know how much you have seen it. The level of impatience among young, old Nigerians is unbelievable. And you keep wondering, where does this come from? Well, because it's not taught. Everybody just thought, oh, you should be patient naturally. No. How do you know that you should be in a public place and be on the queue? I've walked to a bank some times ago, and I joined the queue to be served. I think what was sad on that day was that, oh, they said you shouldn't have queued. And I said, why? The excuse was just, it's not something one could say on television. And I just can't believe it. So you can look at this simplest act, and the same thing we need to do in everything we do. We need to teach the younger generations. And for those of us who are already old, we have the National Orientation Agency. They need to do more and start changing the mindset. You travel around Abuja, for instance, and almost everybody are impatient to wait for traffic light. And you'll be asking yourself, where is everyone rushing to? Of course, they have the argument that, oh, maybe the traffic light itself doesn't work. So it's all of this that puts together. You remember the other time, let me use this opportunity to talk about it. A minister, I think he's now a former Minister of Education, challenged about having to, we have the 6, I think they now call it 9-3 4 system, so the basic education. So the second, from primary school to secondary, you are expected in Nigeria to finish at age 18. And someone said, is a act of the law. And it's true. And people challenge him that why should it be? But the question is this, nobody is asking that, but that is what the law says. And that's what the gentleman was saying, that the law says this. And I told somebody, I said, the day Nigerians are going to wake up to this reality is when somebody wants to become a governor. And someone will go to court and challenge that, okay, well, when you went through secondary school, you did not complete. They require years in secondary school. Because when something is law, you can see what we teach our children. That is the law of the land. But we flagrantly, we even come on television and display our ignorance and disobedience for laws we made for ourselves. It's simple. If we want kids to finish secondary school before they reach 18, change the law. It's simple. Why make laws when you're not going to obey it? But it's very quick to blame the younger generation. That's a very classic example of what we see today in our country. Now, as it stands today, to answer your question directly, it has to be about education. We can no longer leave it to the community. Society is changing. The university you attended, I attended my first degree in Nigeria. The university you attended, the university I attended, if you probably go there today, it's no longer the same thing. The primary school you attended then, it's no longer the same. Things are changing. Then it was easy for the community to help us to develop into secondary school, into primary school, into university. But is that the same we have today? So there must be that consciousness, deliberate effort to teach the younger generation of Nigeria how we want them to live tomorrow. Not to just wake up. I feel it's sad to blame any young man or any young woman who behave in a particular way. I really don't desire. I think, oh, when I was your age. But when I was your age, when I was that person's age, it's not the same country that we have today. Right. So the simple thing is for the system.
Also, looking at the factors hampering asset recovery and trust in government actions, it looks like this is so because there is no publicly available data on the physical and financial assets that have been recovered inside or outside the country. So how important is it that Nigeria implements a proper guidelines for the accountable management of returned stolen assets?
Well, I don't even know if in the first instance, because we're in a democracy, what needs to have happened is that there needs to be an act of the National Assembly, because that's the whole idea of governance. It starts with, we have a constitution, which is a bigger law for the land. Then you now have the act of the National Assembly. So if it's a concern, what's stopping the National Assembly to put together a simple act, and within that act, maybe a commission or an entity is established, or that act will mandate all the MDAs. How is it going to go? But as we speak today, even if an asset is recovered, where does it go? We can only guess. I'm not sure I've ever heard about asset recovery law. But I don't know. Maybe I think we have an entity for assets from financial institutions, but I don't know if their responsibility extends to maybe asset recovered from abroad. But if they have that responsibility, then the question anybody should be asking them is that, why are you not acting on it? But if there is no such, the first starting point is to make sure there is an enabling law for it. Because in democracy, you don't just act. It's the law that gives you power to act. It's like the law is your shutter. Is what makes you to go out there and do what you're going to do. I'm called a national chairman of a political party. There is a law of the Federal Republic that allows Independent National Electoral Commission to register political party, and it is that within that framework that I could become a national chairman. That is the way it works in democracy, and it's not different from any situation of the land. If we don't have such law, the National Assembly should need to talk about that, or if they see the need to amend existing laws to ensuring that assets recovered it doesn't suddenly develop wings again and fly away again. You know, I just want to be gentle about that.
I mean, evidently, the fight against corruption in Nigeria is not an easy one, but it's a necessary endeavor for the nation's future. Mr. Adenuga, let's talk about other matters, particularly beyond the power struggle. Why a strong opposition is crucial for Nigeria's democracy. So let's start with Boots Party. As the national chairman of the party, how has the task of building the party been for you?
It's difficult. It's very easy for me to give the answer. It's extremely difficult. And I will say a big thank you to you because for asking that question, because there are quite a lot of things some of us feel that needs to happen. Number one, as it is today for the benefit of the public, many Nigerians do not know political parties are not funded by government. So it's not different from your any association. It's just that it's an association that has the potential
you
to
think
put someone
Nigerians do not
in
know?
charge of our... Well, I think you'll be surprised a lot of ignorance out there that many people do not know. I've seen this demonstrated even by people you think they should know better. Many do not know that political parties are not funded in any way in Nigeria. But what happens is this, those in government, of course, it's natural they dip their hand in the state purse, and that's why you probably see the likes of the big parties in Nigeria, if I can call them that way, the frontline parties. They are the one who seems to always be successful in the election because I do not have the resources to be able to challenge. And the other part also I need to talk about is that sometimes people think, when people they talk about how much spent in electioneering, especially for political parties and candidates, people think most of this money is to bribe. No, there are quite a lot that needs to be done. You know, the logistics alone is huge. Encouraging people to attend events because people are poor already and they don't contribute to party development. So that's why when you look at the big parties, what would they do? They want to see, or any other parties out there, they only want to see political individuals who are of high net worth so that they can use their money to run for elections. And this is where the whole problem lies. So if an individual use his own money or his net worth or his means to run for election and become a governor, then it's natural as a human being. How would the person start thinking? He will start thinking, I've conquered, you know, and he start doing things like they are emperors. And that's why we see the reactions that we see today. And I will tell you, the system is what creates the people. But of course, it's the people that needs to put the right system in place. If there are no right system in place, then you do not expect at the other end to get the right people. So it's a very, very tough and very challenging. And some of the propositions I've made through Inter-Party Advisory Council regarding the Electoral Act, I think the National Assembly is having consultation about the amendments to the Electoral Act. I know people will say, oh, I've been challenged on this. And I think one of the simplest ways to solve our political problem is to make voting compulsory by law. As we speak today, you find a particular election is only about maybe 10% of the population, if up to that, that ended up electing an individual. The majority of people, it's even frustrating, you'll be surprised to hear INEC views. I'm not sure people even try to hear their views. Everybody criticizes INEC. But if you hear their views, they've conducted elections, they are frustrated as well. They've put a lot of effort in place. But I do challenge them as well that, look, even the effort you've put in place, you have so number of registered voters, and you are saying you're going to be conducting an election on a single day. If 50% of those people turn out, your system will be overwhelmed. And that is the truth. For those of them who can think beyond immediate, they agreed that, look, if 50% of registered voters in Nigeria turn out on an election day, the system will be overwhelmed. And that's why...
Mr. Adenuga, if you say funding... I do apologize. If you say funding is a huge challenge, and part of what I see in the manifesto of the party is why compete when we can collaborate? So would both party in the near future consider merging with a bigger party?
Well, at the moment, the merger may not be the word. Probably But as a political party, if we've seen individuals or entities, other political parties, where we align in thinking, not just to grab power, because this is another problem. People just want to grab power. And I remember interviewing some candidates for the 2023 general elections, and I was just so disappointed in the quality of the people we saw during those interviews. And it's just unbelievable that people just want to grab power, and you ask them simplest questions, and they just can't give you an answer. And you'll be wondering what happened. So the issue is this. The Boot Party will not just go and grab power. We have our ideals, our views, the way things should be done. If we have entities, political parties, who actually align, where we align, then we're free, we're happy to go with them. It's not for all. It's not a case of, do or die affair, or it has to only be about Boot Party. So we've been working with quite a lot of people, and then we're happy to be able to achieve that if it comes up. So it's not a case of it has to be only Boot Party, but our views, our values, you can say those values, the kind of written in our heart, and we don't forget it. We won't forget it quickly. So another thing before I'll quickly make mention about is that when you look at the tax bill before the National Assembly, it's not yet, I wrote an article, but it's not been approved yet by the process we have in our party in terms of publishing anything. And I said, this is something too much, too little. I personally think that I felt disappointed with that act. The bill is still a bill, it's not yet an act, because there are a lot of studies before now that showed that the informal sector of our economy contributes about 50% to our GDP. And that bill didn't do anything to address that. Instead, it's much about increasing taxes. Of course, the good thing this time around is projected over years to 2030, which is great. But the informal sector, what needs to be done so that we don't keep increasing taxes and burdening those people who are already in the tax net. I just felt I need to say that. Then, of course, making voting compulsory by law is very, very important. Electronic result transmission, we've made our position known to the National Assembly through IPAC. And then, of course, we want, in the new Electoral Act amendments to it, the law should expressly forbid any individual or any government agencies to influence our elections. It is wrong, it's not acceptable in any way. Many of us will still remember the Emefiele, and democracy, if it has to remain a democracy, it has to be free of influence. And these are some of the things people don't know about democracy. It's not just about, you can like an individual, that's fine. And it's also fine if you don't like an individual, that's fine also. But once we agree to come to election, whoever is elected, you have to respect it. And that's what you saw in America, that even when people want to say that, for the first time a felon has been elected, but that's democracy. You just can't change it, And so we should prevent people being able to influence our elections or use the system. Right.
Maybe we should wrap up. Maybe we should wrap up with this. I want you to talk to us about the future of opposition parties in Nigeria. And don't you think that to stand a chance at governing, political parties must first prove to voters that they can function as an effective opposition?
Yeah. Yes, it is. Yeah, it's very true. We need to be able to speak to voters. We need to, without ability to be able to meet the voters, it becomes difficult. How do you challenge those in authority? But again, it's for me now. You may care to know, and the same thing with many other party chairmen and our leaders in different states. It's volunteering we're doing. And people expect, sometimes people ask me, when do you have time to write all these things that you write? But we all have different capacity. But don't expect everyone will have the capacity of Sunday Adenuga. No, it doesn't work like that. But we need to put things in place to ensure that even from now, those who are going to come after us are going to meet up with something. So as we speak today, technically it's difficult, if not almost impossible, for the opposition to function. Even when you see even the big parties in Nigeria, the likes of, let's say, parties that have governors, right? I think we have about 5 parties. How much can they do, even as a political party? How much can they do? Because the system does not encourage opposition, does not encourage. For instance, I'm an absolutist when it comes to freedom of expression.
When you say the system does not encourage opposition, what system are you talking about? What's that system?
Yeah, the system overall. For instance, I do not have resources. If I want to make some, I think there was a time we had to be looking for lawyers who are going to do pro bono for us because we don't have the money. There are a lot of cases we want to challenge in court, we want to challenge government for. Now, the issue is this. If a political party comes forward and challenge, they will do better than even NGOs or other agencies, because as a political party, you know where to hit, the target to hit. I'm not going to come here and start talking about President Tinubu or APC because I just want to talk to the crowd. No, we know how we know the targets to hit, to ensuring that those in authority, they act the way we want them to act. It's not about coming to abuse people. What does that do? If you can abuse from now to tomorrow, the person you are abusing will not suddenly leave authority for you. But what will be beneficiary to Sonny Adenuga and any other party chairman out there is that you have a system that you are able to challenge those in authority constructively. Okay? Constructively, and they will feel even better to be able to do that which you have said. But when it becomes Dikari and Mariah who just feel that they should attack people, when you start to attack those in authority for whatever reason, why would they want to listen to you? I'm not saying they shouldn't, but you know, it becomes more difficult. So in opposition, the tax of opposition, and that's why I've even challenged PDP before now, they're good with hindsight. You can't be doing the job of opposition with hindsight. As we speak today, I'm not sure I've seen PDP, for instance, to have made a position on the tax bill. But by the time it's implemented and issues start developing, you start seeing them, their spokespeople start coming to talk. And that for me is bullshit. I'm sorry to say, because an opposition, you should have presented your position.
I think it's a great...
Not until when things start to go wrong.
Conversation tonight. Sadly, we're out of time. Mr. Sonny Adenuga, Chairman of Boots Party, thank you so much for your perspectives on the program tonight. Thank you.
Thanks for having me, Jimoke.
And thank you very much for watching. That marks the end of today's episode of Politics Tonight. But you can watch the repeat broadcast of this episode at midnight. Get in touch with us on our social media handles, Facebook, Instagram, and X at TVC News NG and at Olajumoke using the hashtag Politics Tonight. We're also on YouTube at youtube.com/TVC News Nigeria. I am Olajumoke Olatunji. Good night, everyone.
The following is a paid presentation by ShopX TV. At ShopX TV, our customers are the heart of